God here, and welcome to the Gods of Odds, hosted by two of my favorites, Brad Hoyseth and Dave Daba.
Welcome to the Gods of Odds. It is week number 2 of your National Football League season. That is Brad Hoyseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Daba up in Northern California. And the theme of today's show, Brad, I'm throwing a curveball at you right away. It is Now We Know Why. After the first week of this National Football League season, I think we all learned a lot. Now, for those of you that are just joining us for the first time, we picked 10 of the best National Football League games worth spending some money on every week. And I can tell you that if you picked against the odds last week, 9 times you would have been wrong. That is how many times the underdogs actually pulled off victories. And I don't even want to talk how I performed last week, Brad, so we won't. But I was really sort of curious, what were your initial thoughts on the National Football League last week?
Well, we talked about it a little bit last week and what was going to be the effect of a 3-game preseason where, in essence, a lot of the starters never even came close to playing. I mean, they pronounced before the preseason, we're not going to play these guys. And I think we saw some teams last week that were woefully underprepared to play, a live action football game. Green Bay comes to mind, probably the most pronounced disappointment. The Packers were just outplayed in every aspect of the game. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, I've never seen the guy look that bad. And, it's Aaron Rodgers, he's going to bounce back. But another team would have been Tennessee. I thought they looked absolutely terrible in their opening game against the Cardinals, a game that I picked. And I took the Titans thinking that, they were potentially a bubble team for the playoffs and to make a long run in the playoffs early on anyways. Doesn't look that way. So I thought there was other teams that were better prepared. Somebody like New Orleans, Jameis Winston played during the preseason and he looked really good. And, these are all things that we talked about a little bit last week on the surface, but given that it was week 1, we just didn't know how it was going to affect their play on the field. But there were some bad football games. There were some games that had exciting endings, but they weren't very good football games. The Ravens game, I thought, was a really poorly played football game, but it was a great ending. The Vikings and Bengals, it was an exciting game to watch at the end, but it was a really poorly played football game. I just think we saw a lot of football last week that wasn't very good. I expect that this weekend it's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, so first of all, somebody needs to get into Aaron Rodgers' football camp and tell him to just stop whining already. I've as I sit here with the Viking hat on, I try to stay as objective as possible. I think Aaron Rodgers is by far one of the most, greatest quarterbacks of all time. But please stop doing pregame interviews with Aaron Andrews and just get the past into the past, Aaron, and pull it together. I know we're going to cover the Packer game in a little bit, so I don't want to steal too much thunder. But wouldn't it be great, though, Brad? I mean, seriously, wouldn't it be great if this was just the end of the Packers as we know it and the end of Aaron Rodgers with the Packers? I mean, can you imagine what will happen in Green Bay if they lose at home to the Detroit Lions? Can you just well, that will be it. I mean, you can pretty much put a stake in Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. The disgraceful is the word that comes to mind when I think about what Aaron Rodgers didn't do or did do in that football game. Just absolutely disgraceful. He phoned it in. And, I lost some respect there, I have to say, for Aaron Rodgers. Same thing with the entire Tennessee Titans organization. You were absolutely right about that, Brad. they just did not come prepared at all to play in week one. I mean, and Mike Vrabel, I think we both like Mike Vrabel as a head coach. I was really, really surprised to see how poorly the Tennessee Titans played.
Well, first off, we have to take the opening comment you made you're sitting there with a Vikings hat on.
Yeah.
and you got your Vikings jersey in the background.
Yeah.
So,
some of that. A Los Angeles Laker championship hoodie that does need to be pointed out for those of you that are listening on iHeartRadio.
But some people watching might say, "Well, that's a typical Viking fan right there talking. He's he can't wait until the downfall of the Packers comes." But no, and let's not forget that wasn't just an Aaron Rodgers collapse. That was a complete collapse all around. I thought the coaching staff made some really. Aaron Jones touched the ball, I think, 5 times the entire game.
Yeah,
he is, arguably their number 2 weapon in that offense. And on some days when they're not throwing the ball as much, he's the number 1 option for Aaron Rodgers. And they didn't even attempt to run the ball. And I understand it was played in a weird environment, played in Florida, and people had to change their plans, and it was hot and humid and all that kind of stuff. But that just looked like a team that just wasn't ready from the top down, management to coaching staff to everything. And we talked about it a little bit last week on how, there's been a lot of off-season turmoil in Green Bay. And, it's an early crack, but I expect Aaron Rodgers to bounce back. They do get the Lions, who for 3 quarters lived up to my billing last week, that I said they were in my bottom 5 teams in the league, and then somehow they showed up for a quarter and made it interesting. But I do believe that Aaron Rodgers owns the Lions, and I think he will own them again this week.
By the way, I don't know if you had a chance to check out Inside the NFL's coverage of last week's games yet, but Dan Campbell, who I really like, at least from a motivational standpoint, just yelling at his players when they're coming off the field to keep their head up. It's like. Yeah, it's like it started in the first quarter, went all the way through the fourth quarter. That Detroit Lions team has a lot more heart this year. They might not have all the talent that they're going to need to, make any kind of real run, but they are going to win some games, and they are going to upset a significant amount of teams. And they've covered against the Packers, and I think in 7 of the last 8 games that they've played against the Packers. It's a division rival. It's going to be, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Now, let's go ahead and move into our top 10 games, Mr. Hoyseth, worth spending some money on for week number 2 of your National Football League season. Mr. Hoyseth, as always, you have the honor.
Well, I think, maybe you gave the title of the week. I think 1B should maybe be Overreaction week 2, and I'm trying to guard this week against an overreaction of, the opening game of the year. So my first game is going to be Arizona and your Vikings. And I'm going to throw that one out there right away. Arizona's a 4.5-point favorite. They looked really, really good. The Vikings are obviously a 4.5-point dog, and they did not look very good. But I think 4.5 is a lot of points. I don't think Arizona's as good as they looked last week, and I don't think the Vikings are as bad as they looked. I expect Minnesota to come out. They're going to run the ball, I think, more effectively. They couldn't really look any worse than they did against Cincinnati. I'm going to take the Vikings in kind of a mini upset. I know that's probably not the way you're going to go on this, but I think you've overreacted, Dave. You're the guy I'm talking about. I think you've overreacted with your Vikings. I don't know that they'll win the game, but I think they'll keep it within 4.5. I think it's a field goal game.
Okay, so first of all, I think Brad's absolutely crazy on this one. Brad, let me ask you a question. Who has a better defense, the Cincinnati Bengals or the Arizona Cardinals?
Well, there's no question who's got the better defense. but there's two teams out there playing football, and
Did you know, Brad? Did you know that Chandler Jones is currently on pace for 85 sacks this year?
Well, here's part of the game, though. When they played Tennessee last week, they were up big early.
Yeah.
And it kind of forced Tennessee to get away from what they do well, which is run the football. And then off play action pass, they throw it deep. And, I don't know that scenario plays out. Tennessee's got a terrible defense.
Yeah.
And the Vikings, I think, are a better defense than Tennessee this year. They might not have shown it all that much in game one, but I do believe that Tennessee has one of the worst defenses in the league. In fact, we talked about it last week. Last year, they had the worst third down defense in the league.
Yeah.
And if you looked at the touchdowns that they gave up and big plays they gave up last week against Arizona, many of them, again, were on third down. And so I think the Vikings will show up, play a little bit defense, and they'll keep that game closer. And the closer the game, it doesn't allow those defensive ends like Chandler Jones to pin their ears back and just go forward. They're going to have to contend with the Vikings running game, which I think Mike Zimmer will. He's going to try to get that going this week, because obviously they're not going to keep Cousins upright all season long. No. They know that, and they have to be a little bit more conservatively this week going into Arizona. But traditionally, the Vikings do play well in that type of environment, a place like Arizona.
Yeah, I expect the Vikes to put up a good fight here. I certainly hope so, because I bought some tickets to this game, Mr. Hoyzef. I'm spending money on a plane ride, on a hotel, on rental cars, food, in support of this team, and here I am, actually. Projecting and predicting that there's just no way they're going to win this game, and they're not even going to come close to covering. My hope is that they keep it close, but I just I'm not sold on the Viking defense. Yes, it is better than it was last year, but the secondary is an absolute mess outside of Patrick Peterson. And Harrison Smith, who I absolutely love, but the rest of it's just not there yet. They need more time to gel. Maybe if this game was later in the season, I'd feel differently about it. But just based on what I saw, it's just like they're gonna have such a hard time containing Mighty Mouse in this game that I just don't see them pulling this off.
Moving forward for the Vikings, though, I'm gonna name a number of guys, and you can see if you can tell me what they all have in common. Okay, other than being defensive linemen: Chandler Jones, J.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, DeMarcus Lawrence, who's now out, Randy Gregory, Joey Bosa, Zadarius Smith, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Michael Brockers, T.J. Watt, Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, and Aaron Donald. What do all those guys have in common?
Oh, they're all outstanding defensive linemen.
Right, and they're all defensive linemen that the Vikings have to meet this year.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, it's not good to have your starting left tackle not playing, and he's a rookie. And, I think this team's in big trouble this year, the Vikings. I really, really do.
And for those people out there that say we don't prep for this show, well, at least that Brad doesn't prep for this show, they're wrong. Mr. Hoyzef is 100% prepared for sure.
No, I've been looking up this stat for almost a month now. I came out with that, and I said, look, the Vikings don't have a very good offensive line. They might play the most difficult schedule in the league when it comes to pass rushers.
Yeah.
I mean, that list I had there is like a who's who. I mean, and it covers 13 or 14 of their games this year where they have to play a top flight pass rusher. And so, the Vikings better figure it out, and they better get their rookie on the field real quick, and he's going to have to grow up real quick, or Kirk Cousins is never going to make it through midseason.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that. All right, Mr. Hoyzef, we're going to move on to our second game here. We've got the traveling Wilburys of the New Orleans Saints going into Carolina. The Saints are favored by 3 against one of your all-time favorite quarterbacks in Sam Darnold. Look, Jameis Winston is the first quarterback I ever remember seeing, Brad, that threw 5 touchdowns for less than 150 yards in the air. It's like Sean Payton, like our good friend Kevin Stefanski, is in complete control of his quarterback. That's exactly what we saw in that game. This is going to be a little closer than a lot of us think. Matt Rule's done a nice job rebuilding this defense. I'm a big fan of what Matt Rule is doing in rebuilding this Carolina team. Obviously I love Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, somebody needs to tell Christian McCaffrey to just, when he gets on one of those 40-yard bowling ball style runs, where he just bumps into everything, or that he just like looks for contact. Somebody needs to tell him to just go out of bounds or go down. Because I want to see more Christian McCaffrey, not less, and I'm worried he's just going to hurt himself just in the way he plays. That being said, I really think Sean Payton is enjoying his new tool in Jameis Winston, and I think they're definitely going to cover this spread. I'm taking the Saints in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you here. I think the Saints they're a really good football team, and they're a team that is very, very streaky. I mean, every year they'll go on a 5 or 6 or 7 game winning streak. It usually happens a little bit later in the season. I just found this line to be very low, -3. I mean, I was like, that's not a lot. And we are talking about the Panthers after all. I think Carolina's excited to win the first game, to get a home game. And it is a pretty big matchup for both teams. But I thought the Saints looked really prepared to go into the season. They were hitting on all cylinders, and Carolina won, but it wasn't like, they beat the Jets, right? So it's not like that was something to, pin your hopes on. I think they're going to have to step up their game if they're going to stay in this thing. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Saints blew them out.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, did you see the one of the best highlights of last weekend? Has to be Sam Darnold drops back to pass. Brad, who does he hit deep for a touchdown?
You tell me.
So he hits a former Jets wide receiver deep for a touchdown, who goes into complete jet mode as he catches the ball in the end zone, and then he does basically the jet run after the touchdown. Just absolutely fantastic stuff, I have to say. All right, let's move on to the next game, Brad.
All right, I'm going to go in an over-under game. Las Vegas is at Pittsburgh. That over-under is 47.5. I hit on the Raider game a little bit at the beginning, that even though they won and it was a fun ending, it was anything but pretty football. Pittsburgh has a very good defense. Las Vegas has one less day of work, being that they played on Monday night. Have to go cross country, play at Pittsburgh, which I think is a very difficult environment. I see this game being a much lower scoring game. Pittsburgh offense doesn't have a great offensive line anymore. We always think of Pittsburgh and running the football and that kind of thing. And I think they'll try to run the ball against the Raiders, and they'll probably have some success, but that tends to wind down the clock a little bit quicker. I'm going to take the under in this at 47.5. I know that's probably not going to be popular, maybe even with yourself, but I don't think these teams, either one of them is great offensively. They have their moments. They go in spurts. But I do believe the Steelers are a pretty good defensive team, and we'll have to wait and see. But I'm going the under on that. I thought it was a little high for these two teams.
Yeah. This is like one of those Vegas sucker bets. You're probably right, but something tells me you're wrong. And it's really hard for me to even justify so much going with the over. But I think like this Raider defensive line, showed improvement, but they did get pushed around for the most part. They don't blitz a lot. That's not part of their scheme. Like they blitzed twice on Monday Night Football, and I'm not even sure you could call it a blitz. And the second blitz happened in overtime, which actually caused a fumble. And once again, I'm not really sure you could even call that a blitz. They'll be in, some variations of zone defense the whole time. I think Roethlisberger is going to pick them apart. I see Pittsburgh scoring early in this game, which is why I'm going to take the over, because I think, things are going to loosen up a little bit. I'm also looking forward to seeing the Pittsburgh Steelers rookie running back become a little bit more involved in this offense than last week. I expect more than 60 yards of total production out of Najee Harris in this game. I think Pittsburgh's going to score a lot of points early. Then the Raiders are going to find a way to catch up a little bit, and before you know it, the over is going to be the safe bet to pick in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Raider game last week, and as I mentioned earlier, I thought both teams looked really poor. I didn't think the Ravens looked good at all. And for the Ravens to give up that huge play, and overtake, give up a bunch of big plays in the last 15, 18 minutes of the game, which is really uncharacteristic of a Baltimore team. And I don't think all's well right now in Baltimore. I still don't think that Lamar Jackson is a great X's and O's a great quarterback to have to go and win a big game with, because he still is very inconsistent throwing the football. And, he brings an X factor that nobody else has. Well, not many have, maybe Kyler Murray with his ability to run. But I was really disappointed in that Baltimore defense. I don't think it was so much a case of Oakland or Las Vegas's offense being great, as I just thought Baltimore played really poor football.
Yeah, they did. And I don't know if you had a chance to see the Peyton Manning's call the football game as the alternative Monday Night Football broadcast. Or if you've had a chance to see any of the highlights of it. But for all of those gods of odds fans out there, I'm going to give you a homework assignment, Brad. I'm going to give you one too. Watch the Manning brothers coverage of Monday Night Football. It's on, I think it's going to be on ESPN2 on Monday night. It is absolutely, I tried to watch, I taped it, and, and it started off a little rocky. But by the time they got into the second half, I was like, this is how I want to watch a lot of my football games going forward. Just, two brothers just sitting down, bashing each other while they watch football, mixed with, interviews with Ray Lewis and Russell Wilson. And of course, if you're going to be doing a football broadcast, who's better to interview than Charles Barkley? Just absolutely brilliant. Peyton Manning can't even get like the helmet on his head because his head's too big. Just a great broadcast. If you have a chance, you should absolutely check it out.
Sounds very entertaining.
It really was. Okay. Moving on to what I think is going to be one of the most intriguing and entertaining games of the weekend. The Dallas Cowboys go to SoFi Stadium and play Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers in what most certainly, Brad, will be a home game for the Dallas Cowboys. What do you think, Brad? 75% of the stadium is going to be Cowboys fans?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, I would say at least 50%, but the Cowboy fans, they travel well, and the Chargers fans are, they're still down in San Diego. So, I mean, they might just sell their tickets. But hey, look, the Chargers had an exciting win last week. I wouldn't be surprised if if they have more support this week than maybe in past years.
Yeah, look, I think they'd have I think the Cowboys would have like 80%, maybe 90% coverage of that stadium if Justin Herbert wasn't on that football team. I'll just say that. But seriously, I think the 50-50 split is wrong. I really think you're looking at like you're going to be hard pressed to pick out the baby blue in the stands in this one. Don't forget the Cowboys. They're for those people in North America that don't know, their off-season and preseason training camp is in Oxnard, California, which is just north of Los Angeles by about 50 miles. They are going to dominate that stadium. It will be a home game. It's a West Coast home game for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott just played so unbelievably well. I know that the Dallas Cowboy defense it's got injuries already. There's going to be issues there. This is not going to be a low scoring game. This is going to be a shootout. The Chargers are not just going to score 20 points in this game. I think this game could go either way, but something just tells me that with this home field advantage that the Cowboys are going to have on the road, Mike McCarthy might not screw this up, and the Dallas Cowboys are actually going to find a way to win this.
Where did the Cowboys play last week?
Where did the Cowboys play last week? Did they have they played in Tampa?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was hoping that they played at home because then I could say, well, they played at home last week. It didn't make any difference.
It is Mike McCarthy, right?
No. And so you're taking the Cowboys. I take it.
I'm taking the. I can't see Dak Prescott. I really think he's back. They're going to get the running game going. The secondary is not the best in San Diego Los Angeles right now. It's going to be a shootout. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. But I think at the end of the day, it's quarterback versus quarterback. And I just think Dak Prescott's leadership skills are just a little bit stronger than Justin's at this stage.
I think I texted you during the game last week when the Cowboys were playing Tampa, and I said, hey, the Cowboys actually look pretty good. I mean,
yeah,
offensively, they were great last week. Here's the way I look at it. The Chargers, I think, for the last 3 or 4 years, have been one of the more talented teams in the league. If it weren't for unbelievably bad coaching and clock management and the loss of games by less than 3 points. The Chargers figured it out last week. They won a close game, right? And it's a new day. I'd say the Chargers, I think they're going to flip the page this year, and they're going to win all their close games. This is a line of 2.5. I'm taking that 2.5 points in the Chargers.
That's funny, Brad. I won $5 on FanDuel last week. That doesn't mean I'm going to win $5 again this week.
You didn't win $5 from me.
All right, man. Let's move on to your next one.
All right. So let's see where we're going to go here. One team that was very disappointing, I thought, was the Buffalo Bills. They are playing at Miami, a team that looked okay. The Dolphins ended up winning at New England, a team that I don't think is very good. And Buffalo comes in as a 3.5-point favorite on the road in Miami. I think Buffalo is a really good football team. I think they're both actually pretty talented football teams. But Buffalo, you lose this game out of the gate, you're 0-2. And I know it's way too early to start saying that it's a must-win game or anything like that, because I think these teams are going to be, battling all season long in that division. And but I like Buffalo's chances to bounce back this week. The Dolphins are not as intense with the pressure up front as Pittsburgh was last week against Buffalo. I think Josh Allen has a big day, and I think they go into Miami. And I'm going to say this right now. I think they blow out the Dolphins. How's that?
I have to say, man, I have flip-flopped on this game over the last 3 days. We have a sheet that we put together, and I started out with Buffalo. Then I had the Dolphins. At some point last night, I put the Bills, back up, and then this morning I was just like, I believe in Brian Flores. I think the Dolphins are going to play Buffalo tough, like Pittsburgh's played them. There's a certain way to play Josh Allen and this Buffalo Bills team. And what was disturbing about the Buffalo Bills game against the Pittsburgh Steelers is the fact that they didn't roll out Josh Allen like at all. There was very little actual play action pass in that game. And we know that Buffalo is going to struggle in the running game. Something just tells me that that Brian Flores and this Dolphin team is going to find a way to get things done. So I will take your points, and I'm not going to flip flop again, Brad. I'm going to stick with the green. What is it? Green and orange of
teal. I don't know, but teal, isn't it?
Teal. Yeah, the teal of the Dolphins in this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big game early on. When you look at the schedule this week, that should be one of the more entertaining games of the week. I think one of my next games coming up is also going to be an entertaining game, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I'll let you go.
Okay, well, sticking with green, a darker shade of green. You got the Green Bay Packers at home against the Detroit Lions. Look, you should be concerned about the Lions running game. Not so much that they don't have a decent running back or running back core. It's just that their offensive line is not really that strong. Yeah, I really like the fight of this Detroit Lions team. We talked about it a little bit, Brad, in the opener. Wouldn't it be great? Like, seriously, just wouldn't it be great just to see the Packers implode entirely? I don't think it's going to happen. This is a lot of points, though. You're asking us to take a lot of points. Remember, Detroit has covered 7 out of 8 times against the Packers against the spread. So this is certainly a challenging game from that perspective. But I'm going to go ahead and take the reluctantly, Brad. Reluctantly, I'm going to take the Packers.
I think that's a good choice. I mean, yeah, we can be excited about the Lions playing 1 quarter of football last week, but that's what they played. They played 1 quarter of football.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get it done in the NFL. You've got a Green Bay team now that they were embarrassed last week. And they do have the guys to turn it around. So I fully expect Green Bay being at home in front of the Pack fans. We've seen Rodgers turn it on, when he has to. I don't see anything on Detroit that, schematically they do that's going to stop Aaron Rodgers throwing the football. I think he has a field day. I think the Packers win big. Line's 10.5. And I think in a normal year, it would probably be 13 or 14. So I'm going to take the Packers. I'm going to give that 10.5.
Yeah, I believe in Jared Goff. But I think that 10.5 is going to come into question at some point in the fourth quarter, and we're going to be biting our nails on this one. But I'm definitely not going to flip flop here, and I'll stick with the Pack.
My other big game that I have this week, I think it's a huge game, and it's a gut check time for another team we talked about earlier. It's Seattle hosting Tennessee, and suddenly Seattle's a 5.5-point favorite, and I think you have to ask yourself 2 questions. Is Seattle as good as they looked last week? And is Tennessee as bad as they looked last week? And I think the answer in both cases is no. I don't think Seattle is a great football team. And I think Tennessee is a pretty good football team. I just don't think they're ready to play the game. And, Seattle traditionally is pretty good, but I think this line at 5.5 is kind of an overreaction. If it had been opening weekend, would it have been 5.5? I don't think it would have been anywhere near that. And like I said, I just think week one was a throwout week. I think you have to kind of, take it with a grain of salt. The Titans now have to go in and much like the Packers, they were embarrassed. I think this is one of those overreaction lines that we see a lot of times in week two. I'm going to take the Titans and I'm going to take the 5.5.
Tyler Lockett. If you don't have him on your fantasy football team, you should trade for him now. Look, Russell Wilson, obviously after week one, people are giving him the most valuable player award already, Brad. I'm like, hey, did you not see Jalen Hurts play? Anyways, I look at this game and a couple of things come to mind. Yes, I think Tennessee is going to play, far better. In principle, I agree with most of what you said there. But I've got to believe that after Russell Wilson's wife went to the Met Gala on Monday in a Russell Wilson gown, a number 3 gown, wearing his Super Bowl ring to the Met Gala. That right there is the kind of confidence I look for in a spouse, Brad. I'm just saying. So I look at this and I think, Seattle at home, it's at CenturyLink. It's going to be off the hook. I think the Titans, are going to have to play them tough at the beginning of the game. I could see this actually being a 10-point win for Seattle, if not more. There is one thing though that strategically Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans could do, which would throw a wrench into this, and that is to run Derrick Henry 30 times. And, I don't know if they're at that point of the season yet where they, it's win or go home, where you're going to save that maybe for later in the year. But I think this is a big Derrick Henry game, which should play into your favor of covering the spread. I still think though that just so much talent on the offensive side of the ball, and Tennessee's secondary is a disaster.
I just think it's a bounce back week for a lot of teams that had really, really poor performances in week one.
I can't
wait. I took the Packers, I took the Bills, and I took the Titans because I think they're all really quality football teams that just didn't look very good last week. And I don't think that's emblematic of how good they are, but I saw an overreaction in the line in Vegas. And that's typical of week two in the NFL. And so just looking historically at what happens in week two, teams that look bad that are good football teams in week one tend to bounce back in week two.
I was going to say, I cannot wait. What we should do here is we should set up an overreaction text line. I cannot wait. People out there, I'm going to get the overreaction texts all weekend from Mr. Hoysev starting tonight. And we're not even talking about the Washington football team and Daniel Jones.
Danny Jones. You got plenty of my texts over the weekends about Danny Jones. He is quickly moving down into that bottom 5 list that I made up last week. That includes Matt Ryan. By the way, how'd that team look last week?
Oh God, just out of my death pool after 1 week. Anyways,
but one thing we didn't talk about in the preview was the rookie quarterbacks last week went 0-3, and
yeah,
we'll get into more of that stuff as I know somebody's got the Bears game on the docket, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. But I thought that was an interesting thing. We heard a lot about all these quarterbacks that were going to come in and play with, Mac Jones and Wilson, and I'm forgetting the third here, but the kid down in Jacksonville. But none of them looked particularly good. in particular, the one in Jacksonville, I thought looked really poor. And, we're going to get into that discussion a little bit more when I digest one of my next games, which is the Bears in Cincinnati.
Yeah, let's. I'll reserve my Zach Wilson comments for another day. Joey, Joey, the I'm not a hitman yet, Lawrence. He lost his first regular season game ever. He didn't lose a regular season game in high school or in college. Just real quick, Brad, Urban Myers, come on. Like, what's the over under on Urban Myers actually going back to Fox and being part of that Fox football Saturday noon coverage before the end of the year? Like, is Urban Myers actually going to make it through a whole season, or is he going to just give up after 5 weeks?
Well, Urban Meyer's history has been that he quits his job.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done that everywhere he's been. And Trevor Lawrence better get used to losing, because they got outplayed badly by a Houston team that's not very good. And Jacksonville quickly could go into my bottom 5 tank teams, along with the laundry list, the Falcons, and of course the Lions, and some of those teams. The Giants are getting very close. Let's put it that way. But that's not a good football team. When you go to Houston and get beat soundly by, a Tyrod Taylor-led team where, you really can't even tell me who the number 1 wide receiver is, that's not a good situation, it doesn't seem, in Jacksonville. And you got a coach that doesn't understand the NFL game. This is not college. This is not like going to Ohio State where, you got your pick of the litter of what player you want. You're now in the NFL. You get who they give you, and then you have a certain amount of salary to go out and try to maybe pick up some free agents. It's not the same deal. And I think Urban Meyer found out a little bit about what the NFL was like last week.
Oh, yeah, and the offensive schemes and the defensive schemes. While there's more and more influence from the NCAA in today's modern football game, we saw it. We saw it in the Cincinnati Viking game, in how they're pulling their linemen and how they're spreading the offense out more. But you've got you can just see it in, he doesn't pass the eye test. And that's that's really what it comes down to with Urban Myers. You can just see the players are not bought in, at least in Detroit, for maybe half a season. They're going to keep their head up, Brad. Those players are going to keep their head up with Dan Campbell. They're going to believe in him much longer than they'll believe in Urban Myers.
Yeah, I found it interesting this week. In fact, it was yesterday when they're already starting the rumors, and Urban Meyer had to answer the questions of whether or not he was interested in the USC job. The guy's had 1 game in the NFL, and they're already asking him. Why are they asking him, Dave? Because they know Urban Meyer is not opposed to just getting up and leaving. That's what he's done his whole career.
It's probably why SC went ahead and made the move. You're right. I mean, I hadn't even thought of it till now. Is probably what SC is thinking. They're thinking Urban Meyer is going to be prowling the sidelines of the Los Angeles Coliseum come next season. All right, let's move on to the next game.
Yeah, I think it's you.
Okay. If it's me, then we're going to go to the Houston Texans. Speaking of Tyrod Taylor and the Cleveland Browns, Browns are favored by 11.5 points in this game. Brad, originally Vegas opened it at 12.5. Last time I checked, it's down to 11.5. Look, that's an absolute huge number, but it is against the Texans. And do we really think do we think the Texans are even going to win another game this year? Are we over or are we underreacting to the way Tyrod Taylor played in that game? Do we think the Texans have this brilliant young coach that's going to somehow do some things that other people aren't able to do with less talent. Look, I like Tyrod Taylor. I really hope he has a chance to be the quarterback of this team for the entire season. I hope they have a decent year. But Kevin Stefanski is the downside is they're coming off of their Super Bowl loss last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, right? But they, for all intents and purposes, had the Kansas City Chiefs on the ropes. I've got to believe that with the running game that they have in Cleveland, the control over Baker Mayfield. Look, Baker Mayfield, it's like he's like a puppet being completely controlled by Kevin Stefanski 90% of the time. That's why I think Cleveland's going to win. And I think they're going to end up covering in this game. Their defense is going to get to Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird when you look at the game just on the surface. Houston's the team that's 1-0, and the Browns are the team that's 0-1. I don't expect that to last very long. Cleveland might have been the second best team playing football last weekend.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the team they were playing, the Chiefs. I thought the Browns looked really good. I still don't think they've learned how to close out big games like that. They tend to get a little bit conservative offensively. It's like we're trying to run out the clock the entire second half. I mean, they led by a couple touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
That's not an easy task. Kansas City is a very good football team. And so I think the Cleveland Browns I think they're for real. I think they're really good. You mentioned it last week. Would you be surprised if Kansas City and Cleveland was in the AFC title game? I said, no, I don't think that would be a crazy prediction whatsoever. So I look at 11.5 and I'd go, well, I'd bet that at 14.5. I'd bet it at 15.5. I think the Browns, I remember last year I said, on this side, you got one really good team, and on this side, you got one really bad team. Let's not overthink it. It's paralysis by analysis. Take the Browns, give the 11.5.
All right. We are both in Fred Durst agreeance on that one. Mr. Hoysef, you're in the next game, my friend.
I'm trying to figure out how I only got one game left, and I think you've got two. No, you've only got one left. I'm sorry. My final game, I told you we were going to hit on the quarterback thing with the Bears. Chicago is a 2-point favorite at home against Cincinnati, which I find to be an atrociously low number. I didn't think, unlike a lot of people, I must be in the minority here because I'm watching TV all the last few days and everybody's talking about how Justin Fields needs to get into the game and, what are they waiting for? And it was like an overreaction day after, the Bears lost to the Rams. And I must have watched
Sorry, Brad, I got to jump in. Everybody on TV is right. Let me just jump in and tell you that. Everybody on TV that is saying put Justin Fields in is absolutely correct. He should have been the starter from week 1 of the NFL season. He is just like Russell Wilson. He was ready to start from week 1. Like, what is Justin Fields going to learn from sitting on the bench watching Andy Dalton play quarterback?
I think he did learn stuff, Dave. That's where I disagree with you. And I did find one person that agreed with me, Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells says that Justin Fields is not in a great situation in Chicago because they have a terrible offensive line.
He's right about
that. And I think that the head coach understood that going in. That was a very difficult situation to have to go into SoFi and play the Rams, who I think we found out are a pretty good football team. Defensively, they're great. And so I don't think you could send Justin Fields. I think Chicago would have gotten waxed had they started Justin Fields in that game. And it's nothing against Fields. I think he's going to be a great football player. But that was a typical game where if you're Chicago, you had to do what they tried to do, which, take what the Rams are going to give you, throw it underneath, and hope that your defense can get some stops. It wasn't the offense of Chicago that lost that football game. They gave up way too many big plays. They were in that game late in the third quarter, and they had a chance to win that game. I don't think you can blame anything on Andy Dalton. I thought he looked okay. He did what they asked him to do, which was throw the ball underneath. He was very accurate. They did move the ball, and then they would get the ball into the 25, 30-yard line, And the Rams do what they do. They clamp down. They don't mind giving you the 30s. They'll give you all that stuff in between. But once you get inside the 25, 30-yard line, the Rams are one of the best defenses in the NFL. That's what I saw last week. I say the Bears win, and I say they win big against Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's a fraud. That win over Minnesota means absolutely nothing. Their coaching staff tried to give that thing away 2 or 3 times to the Vikings, and the Vikings just weren't competent enough to take it. I say take the Bears, give the 2 points.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook was down, so it was a bad call by the NFL replay officials. The Vikings should have won that game on a field goal. But still, Cincinnati did play really well. I think I speak for everybody watching the podcast and the big show today. Hey, Brad, will you please put up the phone number to the Bill Parcells hotline? I would love to get in touch with Bill Parcells on this, because
I don't mind. By the way, I don't mind agreeing with Bill Parcells.
Nah,
I mean, I think he's got a pretty good track record. I don't think he's a great human being, but but I don't know him that well personally. But I think when it comes to football, he understands how to win. He understands. Yeah. Remember, he had similar situations when Tom Brady came into the league. He didn't start Tom Brady right away, right? He had Drew Bledsoe, and so he's got a lot of experience. And his rationale on the case with Justin Fields was that I think it's okay to play a young quarterback when the situation's right. And he says with the bad offensive line in Chicago, he just doesn't think it's a great situation to throw that kid into, especially when you're playing a team like the Rams.
Yeah,
if you want to go against Parcells, have at
it. yeah. I'm just gonna move on from the Rams game, Bill, and get back to this Bears Cincinnati game. First of all, I think the Khalil Mack seems to have lost a step, by the way. But I still think this defensive line in Chicago is a little bit better than the Vikings defensive line. They're going to stuff the run more. They're going to do a better job of getting after Burrow in this game. I think the Cincinnati Bengals bubble bursts this weekend in Chicago. And I think the Bears win. You'll see them, sprinkle in some Justin Fields here and there, and just wait, Brad, just wait, till Justin Fields comes in the game. Like, I'm telling you right now, like, if Andy Dalton does not play well, there's going to be a Justin Fields chant from the fans. It is like, people forget like how passionate the Chicago Bears fans are. I mean, you got the Jets and the Giants fans, you got the Packer fans, but like, I think in the National Football League, these Chicago Bears fans are right up there. They're in the top 5 fans in the NFL.
No question. I agree 100% with you on that. But again, I'll go back to something I said a little bit ago. How about not letting wide receivers on your defense just get 7 yards behind you? I mean, the Bears defense didn't play well in the secondary last week. And I thought they got after the quarterback pretty well. I mean, they made it difficult for the Rams quarterback, for most of that game. But then, on 2 big plays, they just let the guy get way behind him. And there was like complete breakdown in the secondary. Also, side note, by the way, Jamar Chase, very exciting young player for Cincinnati. And I think it's safe to say that LSU is now wide receiver U. I mean, they seem to put out a guy, whether it's Justin Jefferson or you name it, just every single year they seem to put out a guy that turns into a star immediately. Jamar Chase could be a guy you might want to pick up on your fantasy team.
Yeah, no, it's a good call. He is absolutely pro ready. You know how, like we say, some quarterbacks, very few, but some are pro ready, day one. These LSU wide receivers are like the routes and the patterns he was running. And then he had some issues with drop balls, in preseason and in training camp, but they seem to have that corrected.
I might have to call my buddy Bill Parcells and see how he feels about it.
Yeah, I'm just saying. The Bill Parcells hotline, now available on Gods of Odds, just $19.95. All right, Brad. Moving on to our last game. 326 yards passing. The cover of our show this week has Jalen Hurts on it. It's Jalen Hurts, 326 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. The head coach of this Philadelphia Eagles team, Nick Sirianni. He's one of these guys, right? Like you probably haven't even heard of him before. But he's one of these guys that has actually won the team over. He's a hard ass. He demands a lot out of the players, and the players are actually responding to Nick Sirianni. He's going to be a household name before you know. I can't really pronounce it right, but he will eventually be a household name. This is at home in Philadelphia. At home in Philadelphia. I talked about the Bears fans. Well, it's sort of like the knowledgeable fans that have gone wrong is the Philadelphia Eagles fans. It is going to be brutal for the San Francisco 49ers in Philadelphia in this one. I've been on the fence a little bit back and forth. I do believe in the San Francisco 49ers team, but something tells me that the Eagles are going to find a way. And if you're giving me 3.5 points with the Eagles at home, I think this Eagle team is going to find a way. This is feels like a little bit of an upset pick to me. This is definitely not the pick you would have been making 2 weeks ago. But after seeing Jalen Hurts play, talk about young receivers. After seeing the Eagles defense play, I've got to believe that they're going to. When Trey Lance comes into the game for the San Francisco 49ers, this Philadelphia Eagle team's been working against Trey Lance anyways with Jalen Hurts. So like it's a sort of a different sort of there's not as big an advantage in this game as you might think for the San Francisco 49ers, which is why, because on paper, the 49ers are clearly a better team, which is why it's only 3.5 points.
Yeah, I'm not real comfortable with the line at 3.5. I mean, probably not a game that I would have picked just because I'm not comfortable with 3.5. I don't like that extra 0.5 point. But, I picked the Niners to win the Super Bowl. I felt really good about that last week going into the fourth quarter at Detroit, but I didn't feel quite as comfortable with it afterwards. Now the Niners have lost a couple guys, Jason Barrett, and then, of course, the running back got hurt again. But I understand that the 49ers do have a stable of backs. To me, this is more about the Eagles than it is about the Niners. I'm not entirely sold on the Eagles yet. They went into Atlanta, who I think is a very, very poor football team, and they beat Atlanta soundly. And if you're going to be a playoff team, you should beat Atlanta soundly. It was impressive. I like Jalen Hurts. I'm impressed with what I've seen so far. But something tells me that the Niners are a really good football team. And ordinarily, if it's a really good football team playing a mediocre team, giving up 3.5 isn't all that bad. So I'm going to say the Niners go on the road. They beat the 3.5, but I don't feel comfortable about it at all.
Got it. All right. Well, there you have it, North America. Gods of Odds, season number 2, week number 2. Our picks are officially in, and they've been locked in, Brad. No changing them now. I can't flip-flop back on that Bills-Dolphins game anymore. It's all in video print.
In closing, there's a lot of teams that are kind of in an odd situation of being on a hot seat, What is your team? What coaching staff do you think right now is the most on the hot seat after 1 week, where people are going, I don't know, this might not work out? I mean, who would you say right now?
Well, I mean, there's several. Look, Matt Nagy, for whatever reason, 28-20 coming into the season's not good enough in Chicago. you can't go 28-20. It's like they should be so thrilled with Matt Nagy as a head coach, and they're not. So I think that coaching staff's, definitely in a lot of trouble. I think, if Mike Zimmer doesn't make it to the playoffs this year, it's over. I think that's an easy place to, look at right now. And Mike McCarthy in Dallas, I think we both think, that another losing season for the Dallas Cowboys, and he's gone as the coach there. But when you look at the coaching staff in Arizona and in Seattle and in San Francisco and in Los Angeles, both of the Los Angeles teams, there's going to be no movement there. John Gruden should be on the chopping block, but he isn't. He'll chop Mike Mayock off well before, he'll destroy Mayock before he'll destroy Mike Mayock so much that the NFL Network won't have him back.
I agree with you on almost all of those. The first thing that jumped out to me was Mike Zimmer. And, the Vikings, I've seen nothing through 3 preseason games and 1 regular season game now that makes me believe this team is going to win more than 5 football games. This is he and Spielman's team. They've been working together now for a long time, and people are growing very, very impatient. And when you've got a quarterback that next year is due to make something like $43 million a year,
not worth it.
Which I've often said in another forum that I go to that he's a $15 million a year quarterback making 35 or 34, whatever he's making this year, and 43 next year. I just don't think much of him as a quarterback. And to me, quarterbacks are coach killers. And I think Cousins is going to kill Zimmer before the end of the season. If not, without question, I think he's gone at the end of the season. You and I talked about it. You and I talked about it last week when we were watching the game. Some of the decisions that Cincinnati coach made, those were puzzling beyond belief.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, I think if there was a coach that I thought would get fired in the first 5 weeks of the season, sort of coming into it, because Mike Zimmer has done enough to make it through a season. First of all, I don't see him not winning, 7 or 8 games. They still might make a move at the end of the year, but I don't see them having enough justification to let him go early in the season. Whereas as the head coach in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Bengals are up by 14 points in the second half, late in the second half of that game against the Vikings, and they go for it on their own 28 on 4th down, and they get stuck. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and I like the fact that he tried to call a timeout, or he did call a timeout in the overtime. They had the ball with 1:15 left. They were at about midfield, and he called it. The Vikings were in a situation where they had to call a timeout if they wanted to have any chance at winning the game, because otherwise Cincinnati was going to run out the clock, and Minnesota had no chance of winning the game. And instead, the Cincinnati coach calls his own timeout, and he saves Mike Zimmer's butt. But it didn't matter down the stretch. But, suddenly Vic Fangio, a guy that I was all over last year, looks very comfortable. And how badly would the Vikings right now like to have Teddy Bridgewater as their quarterback? I think we didn't talk about the Broncos at all. I think the Broncos are a good football team.
I'm not anti Kirk Cousins as much as Brad is, but I do agree that the money they're going to have to pay him next year is not worth it.
It's atrocious.
Teddy Bridgewater, he's a nice game manager. I think there's more upside with a guy like Kirk Cousins if you can protect him. But the problem is protection. And if you can't protect the quarterback, then it's just going to be a disaster. But you just watch this Arizona Viking game. I mean, I'm telling you right now, he's going to be on his back a lot. He's going to be I will be there wearing Viking gear.
And I'll be looking for you, Dave. I'll be looking for you.
Yeah, I'll be there. All right, North America. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Gods of Odds today. That over there is Brad Hoysef in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave DeBaugh in Northern California.
Next week, Dave, we're going to have to get the super van involved somehow. We're going to have to get a pick from the super van of the Vikings game. How's that?
That sounds perfect. That sounds like a plan. All right, wishing you all a fantastic rest of your sports viewing week.
God here, and thanks for tuning in to the Gods of Odds. For more semi-witty sports commentary, please make sure you check out Mighty.rip. Okay, go ahead and kill the music now.